States, and we talked about even though United States is more efficient in producing both wheat and computers, because the Japanese can produce computers while giving up less wheat than the United States. Therefore, they have a higher comparative advantage. So they would produce computers. They would export some of those computers to the United States. Instead, they would buy wheat. And the United States would produce wheat and export to Japan. And this actually holds in the real world, American agriculture, even though Americans are the most technologically advanced country in the world, and they're more efficient in producing almost everything except for oil, perhaps, and like some other goods. But then, because of comparative advantage, they also produce a lot of agricultural goods and export it all over the world. A country has a comparative advantage in a good if it produces the good at a lower opportunity cost than other countries. Countries can gain from trade if each exports the goods in which it has a comparative advantage. Now, we talked about the determinants of trade before as well. The equilibrium without trade is just supply, demand, the equilibrium price and quantity. It's determined by the invisible hand of the market on the domestic market. Total benefits, the upper side, consumer surplus, the lower side, producer surplus. But then we are not only limited to consume domestic products. Look at this laptop. Look at your own laptop. Look at your clothes. Look at your phone. Look at your pretty much everything that we use. Almost all of them are made outside of the United States. They're foreign made goods, came here, and we bought them. And also in other countries, they're buying a lot of American products. Like almost every plane that most people travel on, Boeing jets, they're all made in the United States. People in Australia are traveling on American planes. People in Africa are traveling on American planes. People in Asia, everywhere. What makes countries trade with one another? When you produce something in your country, because of supply and demand, you'll have a domestic price. This is the result of people negotiating with one another and the forces of market, the invisible hand. The same forces exist on a broader scale all over the world. That's the world price, the world price of a good, that price that prevails in the world market when all other countries bring their goods to a market and they negotiate, then they would have a price. Now, what happens when world prices are higher than domestic prices? Assume you're a farmer in Ohio producing soybeans. What happens if a Chinese businessman is offering you a higher price than, let's say, a Texan businessman? Which one would buy your soybean? If you're a farmer, you have produced your soybean on your land, and now you have two customers, one from Texas, who is offering you PD or domestic price, and another one from China. The other one is offering you a higher price, which is the world price. Which one would you sell to? Anyone? One more time. You're a farmer living in Ohio. You just had your harvest, you produced a lot of soybeans, and you have two customers, two business people, one from Texas and one from China. The Chinese businessman or businesswoman is offering you a higher price than the Texan. Who would you sell your goods to? The Chinese businessman. Why? Because you like to sell your goods to the highest bidder. You like money. Everybody likes money. So we want to make more money. If I have two customers, one of them is offering me a higher price, I will choose that one. Therefore, when world prices are higher than domestic prices, country exports the good. We don't care who is this person. We don't care about his nationality. We don't care about his religion. We don't care about his ethnicity. We only care about the price here. This is why Milton Friedman was supporting free trade. He said trade between people focusing on self-interests would help us. If you only care about the price, you would export the good. That's a good thing. The opposite can also happen. When domestic prices are higher than world prices, consumers don't buy from domestic producers, they buy foreign made goods. Now, we all talk about buy domestic, protect the domestic industries. But when it actually comes to reality, people with limited budget, they would prefer to save money and buy the cheaper good. That's why we buy Chinese TVs, Vietnamese T-shirts, um, Saudi Arabian oil, all of these goods because of the price, because the world price is lower than the domestic price. The same self-interest which drove you, the farmer, to sell your products to the Chinese businessman is what driving you, the consumer, to buy your t-shirts from the Chinese manufacturer. And that's what drives trade, this difference between domestic prices and world prices. Now, first, before we go deeper into international trade, we have to use certain assumptions to make it easier for us to study it. One of the most important assumptions is that we assume we're dealing with a small economy, which is only a price taker. We're not talking about a big country like the United States that the president of the United States can actually affect the world market by just tweeting, or China, when the premier of the Chinese Communist Party can actually say something in a speech and change many things across the world. No, we're talking about a small country. Let's say my apartment. If this is a small country and I'm the emperor of this apartment, let's assume, then I can't really influence the market. I cannot go and negotiate different prices with President Trump or Premier Xi from China. I just have to accept whatever price there is because I'm a very tiny country. Now, we assume in the world we have an infinite number of these tiny countries. A small economy is a price taker. No one would take me seriously. I'm the emperor of this apartment. No one will really take me seriously. So I cannot affect the world prices. I just have to accept what it is. Its actions have no effect on world prices. When a small economy engages in free trade, world prices is the only relevant prices. Why? Because I'm a very tiny country. I cannot change anything. I just have to accept the things, the way things are. No seller would accept less than world prices. Can sell the good for world price in the world market. When you have access to the world market, that's the lowest price you can accept. If the domestic buyer tells you that I'm not going to pay the world price, then you would not sell your goods. You would sell it on the world market. No buyer would pay more than world prices. If the domestic buyer can actually buy something cheaper from the world market, then they wouldn't buy from you. They would go there and buy it from them. So this is a basic assumption that we put to be able to study trade. Of course, these assumptions not really true. Again, especially when it comes to important countries trading with one another, like United States and China, two countries can actually effectively influence world markets and world prices. But then we need to learn the basics to be able to study more complex situations like American and Chinese trade. A country that exports soybean. Let's talk about soybean. Without trade, this is what we have. Without trade, we have our supply, our demand. This would be the equilibrium price. This is the price level. Points above are how consumers are enjoying being in the market. Remember, every point on the demand curve represents a person and how much this person values this good. So if you value a good really high and the price is this, all the difference is how much you enjoyed and how much you benefited from buying this good. Same applies for the demand side for the producers. Every point it's showing us how much this individual producer is spent on producing this good, and the price is the revenue. The difference will be the profit of this business. For consumers, we talk about benefits. For producers, we talk about profits. So all these are above are your consumer surplus, your total benefit from consuming. All these below are producer surplus, your total profits for all producers from selling these goods. This is without trade. But then, let's say we're talking about the soybean market. We introduce trade now. Now the American farmer doesn't have to actually only sell to the American consumer. The American farmer now has the option to sell to foreigners. Let's say the world price is this much. This was your domestic price. This is your world price. Now that the American farmer is facing a higher price, they would choose to sell on that price. This would be the real price now. No one would care about the domestic price anymore because the producers will not sell on the domestic price, only care about the world prices now. What happens now is that, first of all, producers can now expand their production. All those people who were, they had a farm, they lived in a small town, but they weren't farming. Let's say they were accountants or lawyers or school teachers, and they don't really know much about farming, so their costs are too higher if they want to farm. Now, because the prices are higher, they can still make a profit if they farm. So they stop working as accountants and school teachers and lawyers, and they would start farming. So production would go up because of this new price, this new higher price. On the other hand, no one will be using the domestic price. That old price is gone. So now we're facing a higher price. Now, when I go to Walmart, I want to buy myself soybean. Now I can see the prices are now much higher. Oh my God, what happened? No one is using the domestic price before. So now I'm seeing a really higher price tag on soybean. What happens is that all those people who were here, they weren't really a fan of soybean, but they would buy it just because it's cheap. Now they're facing a higher price, they would not buy soybean. They would leave the market. This would be the new domestic consumption level. So consumer surplus is only these individuals. These are the people who are huge fans of soybeans. They loved it. So they value soybean enough to pay the higher price. All this yellow area here are your new consumer surplus. But producer surplus are all the old farmers who were already in the market. Now they're enjoying a higher price, therefore higher profits. And also the new farmers, the lawyers, the school teachers, the accountants who had a farm but didn't really farm because they didn't know much about farming and they liked their old jobs. Now they enter farming. Now they start farming. All these people making profits. So all these individuals here, their profits added together is your producer surplus. Now, tell me first, who enjoyed this new situation? Who is the winner here? This new setup. Who's the winner? Remember, in economics, you have winners and losers. Who's the winner here? Whose situation improved? Simple. Who's happier? The consumers or the producers? Not both. Someone is not really happier because he actually has to pay higher prices. When you go to Walmart and you see the price of your soybean went from this to this, are you actually happy? Like, yeah, I like international trade. I like to have diverse options and different brands I can choose from. But at the end of the day, I really care about prices. Before, I was buying my soybean at this price, the equilibrium price, the domestic price. Now I'm facing this price. The producer is happier because they are making more money. Exactly. Producers are happier. Exactly. Thank you, boss. When world prices are higher and producers now have access to world price, they can enjoy uh, the higher price. The consumers, on the other hand, they're not really happy because now they have to compete with foreign consumers and they have to pay a higher price for the same goods that they used to buy at a lower price. But then, in terms of total surplus, the total added benefits to everyone in the market, Are we doing better than before or worse than before? By engaging in international trade, could we improve the total benefit added to this market? Remember, before we just had this supply, demand. This upper side was consumer surplus, the lower side was producer surplus. Now we have this bigger picture. Total surplus has increased overall. Exactly. As you can see, this new setup has improved by this much. This is how much we added to our total surplus. This part is added. And this is something good. We like this. That's why economists love international trade. They love efficiency. We love it. It's like adding to total efficiency of a market is like giving us a Christmas gift. This is beautiful. We love it. Let's fix this. So, as you can see here, you can see that part A is your new consumer surplus. These is the new prices we're facing. Producer surplus is all the area below the new price level. And what's added is part D. The part D is your gain from trade. How much we manage to increase the efficiency of the market by letting people trade one another with the different countries. Now, this was the situation when world prices are higher, like soybeans. In many situations, world prices are actually lower, like plasma TVs. People who buy plasma TVs, they can like look at the brands of the TVs, and oh, it's almost always foreign made. Why? Because world prices are much cheaper than domestic prices. In this example, I want you to find consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus with trade. Forget about without trade. We've done it a dozen times before. This time, just find the situation with trade. The same things we did before, but now I just need you to find the area. You don't actually need to have a number. We'll find the numbers together. Just find the areas that represents consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the total surplus. And find me who wins and who loses in this case. You have 5 minutes. Make sure you do this. See you in 5. Okay. First of all, tell me when world prices are lower than domestic prices, therefore no one cares about the domestic prices. How many TVs are sold? Prices are now lower. Before, people could afford to buy 400 TVs. People who valued TVs were here, 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 here. What about now? Now that the prices are cheaper, how many TVs are sold? Remember, every point on the demand curve, it represents how much an individual customer like me and you values a good. If our value is higher than the price, we would buy it. When prices goes down, we would buy more TVs. Now, how many more people would buy TVs? This was the old prices. The new prices are here. You start here. These are the people who really love TV. They would still buy it and they would enjoy a lower price. They would benefit more. 400 people. But then new people also enter the market. 600 is demanded now. Yes. 600 TVs overall. Exactly. Thank you. Now, 600 TVs are sold in total. Now, this is the demand side. All this area here is our demand side. For the suppliers, every point represents our costs. If I was a TV producer, you was a TV producer, every point represents how much it would cost us to produce a TV. Some are more efficient than others. This is the price. We would sell this much, this much, this much, all the way. All the way here. Before, these many factories were also producing TVs, but now how many are produced by the domestic market? We had the answer before. 200 by the domestic producers. Because the domestic producers are now facing a lower price, all these producers who were not really efficient, they can no longer make a profit, they would leave the market. This is why when foreign made goods enter the market, many people lose their jobs. These are the people who couldn't survive in the new price environment. They would lose their jobs. Only these many people stay, the 200. So this is your producer surplus. All of this. Your consumer surplus was this area here. Your producer surplus, this area here. How much was added to the total efficiency? This part here. This new triangle is how much we could improve the efficiency of the market by letting foreigners to come and sell their cheaper TVs here. Now, question for you. Who is benefiting here and who is losing? Who is happier than before and who is not happier? Who is sadder, actually? Consumers are happier. Consumers benefit more. Exactly. Now you have access to the same goods, but at a cheaper price. So you're enjoying the cheaper price. You're buying TVs. You're happier. Domestic suppliers are less happy. That's why people don't like uh, foreign goods. Why? Because domestic suppliers can no longer sell at the old prices. Their prices are now much lower. They had to reduce their output, which means more people losing their jobs, more unemployment, more angry people. They're not happy. And this is very important when you talk about international trade. Very nice. This part was added. This is a gains from trade. The big triangle is your consumer surplus, and the small triangle below is your producer surplus. As you can see, producer surplus is now much tinier than before, while consumer surplus is much bigger. Any questions? Is there anything you don't understand here? If there's any questions? No questions? Very nice. If you have any questions, you can ask, send me an email, ask for office hours as usual. So let's move on. We talked about this. When world prices are higher than domestic prices, what happens is that producers export their goods. The example is soybean. That's why American soybean is being sold in China. Consumer surplus would fall because the consumers now facing more competitors. They have to compete with foreign consumers as well. But producer surplus goes up. Producers can enjoy a higher price by selling their goods to foreigners, and total surplus would rise, as we showed. When domestic prices are actually higher than world prices, the opposite happens. Foreign goods enter our markets. We buy cheaper, we're happier. Producers not happier, they would face a lower surplus, and a total surplus would actually go up, as we showed. Past major trade deals have benefited most Americans. As you can see, of course, the important term here is most. Most Americans. 93% of economists agree. And like those 7% are uncertain. They're the ones who talk about perhaps the long-term consequences, how unemployment effects would actually hurt many Americans in the long term and things like that. But almost every economist asked agrees, and no one disagrees. But then why there is so much uh, disagreement? Why there is so much pressure on international trade? Why many people are angry? As there are winners, there are losers. Consumers, they face an increased variety of goods. Now, instead of only buying, let's say, two brands, buying from two brands, now I can buy from 10 different brands of goods. Now, when I go to a restaurant, instead of facing only 3 or 4 options of American foods, now I can order Chinese, I can order Indian, I can order Japanese, I can order Korean, I can order Middle Eastern and Mediterranean. I have a million different choices. And that's a good thing. Producers, they face a lower cost because of economies of scale. Economies of scale, what do we mean by economies of scale? When I want to sell something, I need a plant, for example. I need a factory. I open a factory, I hire a few workers, and I produce some goods to sell in the domestic market. Now, if my prices are lower than the world market and I have access to the world market, I can actually hire more people and work 3 shifts and produce a lot more goods, sell it to the foreign markets as well. When I hire more people and work 3 shifts around the clock, I don't need to open another factory. My costs only increase by the salary of the workers that I pay for and the electricity bill and things like that. I don't need to spend money on increasing my land, for example. Just the one factory that I have is enough. Because now I managed to increase my output without actually opening up a new factory, I managed to save money. If you divide all my costs over all my output, now my per unit costs went down. This means economies of scale. I managed to save money, lower my costs. That's a good thing. But then increased competition. When foreigners enter our markets, we have to compete with them. Reduce market power of domestic firms. Now I have to compete with foreigners. So I no longer have the market power that I had before. Before that, people had to buy from me. Now they can buy from someone else. I have to compete with them. One very good example is Trump's administration regarding pharmaceutical prices and drug prices. I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they came up with this plan, which I really like this plan. I don't know if they actually implemented it, just talked about it. They said that if you don't lower your prices, American pharmaceutical companies, if you don't lower your prices, we're going to bring foreign companies to sell their drugs here in the United States. What would that happen? Then American drugs would have to compete with foreign drugs, drugs from France, from England, from Israel, from India. Now they're facing tougher competition. Now people don't have to buy their insulin from them. They can buy it from an Israeli company or a French company. That would change things. It would reduce market power of domestic firms. That's a good thing. It would, especially for medical products and drugs, because people need them. Enhanced flow of ideas. That's actually another very important thing that comes with trade. When I trade with other people, I can learn from them. For example, I'm a truck driver. I only drive around the town, and whenever I have a flat tire, I can only go to the same mechanic, and I can only learn from him how to fix my flat tire or replace my tire. But when I drive to another country, perhaps they have a different method to change a flat tire. And when I have a flat tire, I can learn from them. If that method is better, I can learn something. I can be more efficient. If my method is better, they can learn from me. They can be more efficient. This would facilitate the spread of technological advances around the world. It also applies to history. When you talk about producing steel, Indians, the subcontinent India, they have this very efficient way of producing steel, very efficient way. And this method was actually developed like thousands of years ago. I'm not sure, like many years ago. It was not something modern. And no one knew about it. The whole world was producing steel, experimenting, using different methods, and they could never produce steel as efficiently as the Indians. And the Indians just kept it to themselves until the British arrived. When the British arrived in India, they actually saw it. They were trying to buy tea and they didn't really care about steel, but they suddenly noticed that the Indians are producing steel in a very efficient way. They were like, wow. They learned it, took it back to Europe with them, and this was actually the starting point of all the innovation that came after that. This revolutionized steel manufacturing. Very important. So enhanced flow of ideas facilitates the spread of technological advances around the world. Another thing that I would probably add, if it was like my opinion, is that trade would help world peace. When countries are trading with one another, they're less likely to go to war with each other. And that's a good thing. When countries are less likely to go to war with each other, they're less likely to bomb each other's factories and destroy each other's economies because they're relying on each other. And that's a good thing. But then, why all the opposition to trade? Because the losers have more incentive to fight against free trade than the winners. The winner is someone like me. Thanks to international trade, now I can buy a cheap pair of sneakers every 3 months. I'm much happier. I like my shoes, but do I really care about it that much? Yes, I like new shoes. That's a very good thing. But compared to the person who lost his job, who lost his house, who can't afford to pay for his kids' school tuition, he or she lost a lot more than I did, lost everything. This is very important. Even though, like, for example, I'm teaching you all this about free trade and I believe in this, I cannot help myself but to sympathize with that person. Like, I'm happy to give up on my sneakers. You can have my sneakers. I just need a pair of shoes to put on. But that person not lose everything he has. Because that's actually like a really horrible thing to happen to someone's life. That, and we can see it around each other. Like many of us have family members who lost their jobs. They were working at a factory. They had a really nice job, real nice house. Everything was going great for them. And suddenly the factory closed down. Suddenly they told them, you're no longer needed. They didn't have any other skill. They didn't have any other experience. They were devastated. In my own family, I have uncles and aunts who went through such an experience. So, and what happens here is that in these kind of losses usually happen among a concentrated group of small people. When a factory closes down, people who are affected already know each other. They're already friends with one another. Their families, they're in contact with one another. Often their kids play together, go to school together, because we're all living in close proximity. We're more likely to be friends with one another when we're all working for the same factory. When that factory closes down, we can get together. We can organize. We can do something. We can talk to the local politicians. One of us could run for office, and then we can advertise for that person. We can campaign for that person. Losers are concentrated around a small group, the losses. While the gains, not really. Gains are millions of people who get to enjoy new pairs of sneakers. Not really important. I'm not going to fight another person in an election if they try to take my sneakers away from me. Gains are spread thinly over many people who may not even see the benefits. I may not even understand that these new shoes that I just bought, it's because of the international trade. I may not even like it. Some people actually don't like it when they go to a store and buy something, it's written made in Japan on it. They wouldn't be happy. They wouldn't even notice that the lower price that they're paying for is because of this made in Japan written on this good. The winners from trade could compensate the losers. The way to avoid all this conflict that is happening on trade, over trade, and all these disagreements is to compensate the people who are losing. When someone is losing all his life, you could easily compensate him. Just ask all those millions of people who are enjoying new pair of shoes to pay a 1% tax, something like that, and then compensate the person who lost his house, the person who's lost his job. That can be done, but then it never happens. The problem is such compensations, they rarely occur. They never happen, almost never happen. And this is what's changing the world, especially on international trade. What makes people so sensitive about this? What makes different ideologies agree on disagreeing with international trade? For example, right now you have on one side you have President Trump, and on the other hand you have Senator Sanders. You may think that Trump and Sanders are the most uh, the furthest away from each other. But if you go to their campaign sites and their like political sites and you read their trade policies, they have the exact same trade policy. Not the exact same, but almost the exact same policy on trade. They're actually agreeing with each other on trade. On every other thing, they completely disagree. They can't stand the other ones. They're like you know what it is. But when it comes to trade, they're saying the same thing. Why? Because people are just angry and fed up with this kind of situation in free trade. And these compensations that we are being promised, they never happen. And this is a huge issue. This is a huge issue. This is why many people are now talking about this. And I'm pretty sure this will continue to dominate economic discussions for many years. This and environment, trade and environment are the two most important things in my opinion. Now, when losers are angry, people who lost everything, they can organize, they can run for office, they can find a politician who would champion their cause, and they would try to fight back. Now, assume their politician was just elected. This politician can do certain different things, can use a certain different tools to fight against this free trade that is hurting people, in his opinion. The most important tool is this tariff. I don't know if you follow the news or you just accidentally you may turn on the TV or the radio, you could hear people talk about a trade war between the United States and China. That trade war was Americans putting tariffs on Chinese products and the Chinese putting tariff on the American products because both sides are angry that the other side is taking advantage of each other of the other one, and they started to actually put punitive tariffs on one another. Exports. Tariff is a tax on goods produced abroad and sold domestically. Tariff is basically, I say, okay, next time you go to Walmart, If you buy American, good for you. You don't need to pay anything more than the price tag. But if you buy foreign goods, you have to pay something to the government. If I was the president, for example, I would tell you next time you go to Walmart to buy your groceries, it's fine if you buy American. If you buy American made products, that's all right. I don't charge you anything. But if you buy foreign products, for every foreign products, you have to pay something like a tax to me. You have to pay something to the government. What happens is that when I tell you this would effectively raises the world prices. I don't care if I go to Walmart who I have to pay. I just see that now, thanks to tariffs, my, let's say, my French wine is now more expensive. Next time I go to Walmart, my French wine, which used to be a world price, now it's a world price plus the tariff the government put on. So now it's more expensive. It's effectively raising the world prices. It raises domestic prices above world price or the effective one by the amount of tariff. This is what happens. Let's look at this example. This is the current shirt example. Before tariffs, when it was free trade, world prices were 20. Excuse me. Talking non-stop since morning. World prices is 20. World price is 20. Buyers would demand 80. Remember, buyers would buy, all the point to the price here. Domestic sellers would only supply 25 because they would sell all the pointed price here. And the difference is supplied by foreigners. Now, domestic cotton shirt producers are angry because they kept losing their jobs. They would go campaign, they would elect a politician. That politician would effectively put a $10 per shirt tariff on each cotton shirt, which effectively, rises the price to 30. It raises the price from 20 to 30. This 30 is the real price now we're facing. This was the world price before free trade, when we had free trade. But then Mr. Politician adds a tariff, effectively raising the prices to this new level. Now, before that, domestic producers would sell this many and consumers would buy this many. The difference were the imports. These are the imports. Now, situation changes. Prices are now a little bit more expensive. So people who were here, and here, they would stop buying cotton shirts. This is our new purchase. But then when prices are more expensive, some of those factories who were closed down, they would reopen, start hiring people again. Before that, they were only producing this much. Now they're producing this much. So your consumer surplus, which was only this small triangle, now becomes this bigger triangle. It's still small, but it's bigger. It's something. It is now something. Your consumer surplus, however, which was this whole huge triangle before is now this triangle. As you can see, it's now tinier. Of course, this is the tariff amount. This would be your imports, the new imports. The new imports are this. And for each unit of import, we pay this much tariff to the government. So this money also goes to the government. The government also benefits here. This is your total surplus. Now, if you look closely, you can see that actually something bad has happened. Before that, your total efficiency was this whole part. Now, it's this new part which lacks these two tiny triangles here and here. These are now deducted. Even though now you're paying the government this much, your consumers gain this much, and your producers gain this much, but your consumer surplus is reduced so much that these two triangles are lost. And this is why we don't like tariffs. This is why economists don't like tariffs. Remember, economists love free trade because it maximizes efficiency. We love efficiency. We love to just increase and maximize the total efficiency. What happens here is that you still have this part above $30, all the benefits to your consumers, A plus B. This new triangle here, C plus G would be a producer surplus. And part E is the money that goes to the government. The $10 tariff, 30 units of goods are being imported. For each unit, $10 goes to the government. Therefore, in total, $300 goes to the government. Part E. Part E is the government's revenue from putting tariff on. And your total surplus is all the green parts. If you can see, if you look closely, you can see part D and part F are gone. Why? These are deadweight loss. If you remember from last time, when there is a drop in efficiency, we call it the deadweight loss, and we absolutely don't like it. It's like a nightmare for economists. Why there is deadweight loss? Part F represents all the people who would enjoying their cotton shirts, but no longer can afford it because the prices went up, so they left the market. Very bad. We don't like people to leave the market. Some people saw the new prices and they said no longer want it. They're going home. Deadweight loss from underconsumption of t-shirts. They stopped consuming. The other part, this is a more complicated part. Part D, deadweight loss from the overproduction of shirts. This part D is because producers who aren't really efficient are now producing a lot more shirts. But they're not really efficient. They're facing an artificial price which actually doesn't exist because of government intervention, and they're enjoying that artificial price while they're not really efficient. And that's overproduction. The deadweight loss from the overproduction of shirts is represented by part D. So these two purple triangles, or in my picture, blue triangles, represents the drop in efficiency after the government intervenes and puts a tariff on the market. Tariffs are the most important tools available to a government to fight international trade and change the change the market and change the market. Another tool, import quotas. Import quotas is another tool when the government says, okay, Mr. Foreign Producer or Mrs. Foreign Producer, you can only produce these many goods. 500, 10,000 tons, some quantitative limit. Above that, you're not allowed to sell in this country. You can export 10,000 TVs or 500 tons of soybeans. Above that, not anymore. Well, this is not really attractive because, first of all, you're not making any money. If you just tell people that you can't sell, you're not making any money, and governments like to make money. If you tell them you can sell, but for every unit you have to pay me something, you're making some money. But if you just tell them you can't sell, I don't want to see you here, you're not gaining anything. You're just sending the person away. It mostly has the same effects as tariff. It will raise prices, reduce quantity of imports, reduce buyers' welfare, and increase sellers' welfare. But then all those money that you could have made from tariff, instead, a portion of it goes to the foreign producers of the imported goods. Those foreigners can now sell them at a higher price. Why? When I tell you you can't sell 10,000 TVs, you only are allowed to sell 5,000, you know that people still want to buy my TVs, so you just raise your prices and you make more money. You would enjoy more profits. Then you would smile and say, okay, Mr. Government, if that is what you want, I will increase my prices. So import quotas, they're not really popular because they're not really helpful. There are some situations when they are helpful, when they're again implemented against, for example, dumping. Dumping is when some countries cheat in international trade and they just bring a ton of goods and sell them at artificially low prices below their own costs just to destroy their competitors, their competition. If I want to drive my competition out of the market, even though this pen cost me $10 to make, I'm not going to sell it $12. I'm going to sell it $5 just to get rid of my competitors. I would bring this pen to the United States. I would sell it to $5. Everyone would buy this pen, which is ridiculously cheap. What happens then no one would buy American pens. American pen makers lose their business, lose their jobs, they would leave the market. When they are gone, I'm the only one left in the market. Next day, people come to buy this pen. Instead of $5, it'll be $20. And after that, there is no other pen maker, so people have to buy my pens for $20 because I drove all my competitors out of the market. And this is illegal, actually. This practice is called dumping, and it's illegal. The United States constantly accuses China of dumping. Chinese accuse Americans of dumping sometimes. Japan accuses Koreans of dumping. Everybody in the World Trade Organization is constantly accusing the other one of dumping. And that's actually why we have certain courts full of economists who study these things, and then they would say, okay, are you actually dumping, or no, they're just a false accusation. In certain situations, in order to fight dumping, they use import quotas. Otherwise, not really popular. There's no point in it. Now, there are certain arguments that people use to disagree with international trades. The most important one is the job argument. The job argument is the most important one. It's emotional. It's like a human argument. We all can sympathize with it. Like I'm myself, I'm a PhD student of economics. I'm actually doing research on trade right now. I know this stuff. I understand they're correct, but still, when I see someone losing his job, I get angry. I say, just get rid of free trade. I don't want it because it's emotional. The jobs argument is the most important argument. Trade with other countries destroys domestic jobs. Free trade creates jobs at the same time that it destroys it. This is what people ignore. When you engage in free trade, yes, there are some factories that close down, but in order to be able to buy foreign goods, you have to sell them some things. And who's going to produce those some things? Other jobs. So as you lose jobs, you're gaining jobs. 10 years ago, the United States was an oil importer and like and export something from here, they export something to that country, import from that country, but then they kept importing and importing and importing. On the other hand, they kept producing more oil. Now, the United States is actually an oil exporter. It's an energy powerhouse. Hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created because now the United States is more efficient in producing energy and they're now exporting oil. So now, next to Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, you also have America as an oil exporter, which is really interesting. It changes a lot of things. All those jobs lost in, for example, Michigan and like other states, those manufacturing jobs, a lot of them move towards the energy sector, more moves towards a new industry that is now exporting. Free trade creates jobs at the same time that it destroys them. And if you look at the numbers, you can see that total unemployment does not actually rise as imports rise, because job losses from imports are offset by job gains in export industries. So if we do it right, if we don't mess things up, we can actually create jobs as we lose them, while we're able to increase people's standard of life by making them able to buy cheaper goods. If you look at this graph here, you can see as imports increased in the United States, the share of imports in the total economy went up. Unemployment didn't really change, it stays the same. As imports went up, also there needed people needed jobs to produce things for exports. That's the argument. Of course, the argument is much deeper than that, but for now, let's keep it this way. Next time, we're going to wrap this up and by talking about some other arguments and a few case studies. And this will be the end of chapter 9. After chapter 9 is finished, I will post your first writing assignment, which is a midterms style. It's an open book assignment that you are facing a few different scenarios and you'll need to use your economic knowledge to solve a few questions. And I need you to actually use your own innovation and on your own opinion and actually talk to me about certain policy issues by using your economic knowledge. But don't worry, it will be easy. Don't worry about it. And it will be open book, and you'll have like a week to do it. Any questions? If there's no questions, you can go and have a nice weekend. Have a nice day. If there is a question, you can just stay and ask. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'm here for you. Okay, if there is any questions, you can also email me and ask about me there. All right. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Take care.
I have a quick question.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So I unfortunately I'm having trouble with my Cengage still. I don't know why, but I don't have your course as one of my courses. I sent an email, but I think it was during this class that it was sent. So I was just wondering, what should I be doing? Should I talk to anybody or?
You could contact Cengage technical support, or if you cannot access Cengage at all, I will write some different assignments, and you can use those assignments. You can do those assignments instead of your Cengage homeworks.
Okay. I'll try contacting Cengage. If that doesn't work, then I'll email you.
Yeah, just let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a nice weekend.
You too.